my consciousness basically ends in the car, but apparently 2 minutes later we do actually get there. And what they say is that I tried to use his inhaler on the front lawn. That's when I kind of fell on my back and went unconscious. But my memory stops in the car. All I remember is being in kind of like a black, kind of like a black space. It literally felt like space, like upon reflection, that's what it seemed like, as if I was floating through space, but there was no stars or anything, and there was this one light way off in the distance.
I want to welcome everybody back to another episode of The Soul Inspired. Today we have Dave Sledge with us. He is an NDE. He's had a near-death experience. He also runs our Sliver of Time podcast. So I'm really excited to have him here. So first of all, thank you so much, Dave, for being on The Soul Inspired.
Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it very much. And yeah, I'm excited to talk with you. So,
I always start most of the podcast the same way, most of the episodes, and I just kind of try to get a little bit of information on um, who you were pre-NDE. What was your childhood like? Did you have any faiths you grew up in? That kind of thing. I just wonder if I can get like a brief little synopsis of who you were before the NDE.
yeah, definitely. And just a quick, I don't know if it's worth mentioning for the audience. My energy level's a bit low. I'm a little bit under the weather, but I'm going to try my best and answer your question. So, yeah, before my near-death experience, which happened when I was about 8 years old, not too much of, nothing crazy in terms of faith, religion. I mean, my parents gave me the option to, try out church and all that stuff. We were never like a church every Sunday type family, but yeah, I had a first communion, and to this day, I have no idea what that means. I just know that I did it. So, it didn't last long. There was no like specific beliefs, but I will say, I think that the ideas of, heaven and hell and God and that stuff, I think to a fair degree got like rooted in me. That's kind of like that was kind of my baseline belief system just by default. That's just what other people told me. So, yeah, I guess that would be the background. And other than that, man, just a normal kid going to kindergarten, first grade, whatever, and started skateboarding around the time of my near-death experience. So I don't know if it was before or after, but it was like around the same age.
Okay. All right. So that gives me a little bit of information. So basically, I think a lot of us can probably relate to that where we were in a religious family, or not religious, but we were just raised in some type of religion. We were going to church, those types of things. And, but you were just kind of going with the flow, kind of like not much difference between you going to church or going to the grocery store type thing up until you know what I mean? So you can't really, some people do get influenced by that as they get older, I think, probably in their teen years and stuff like that. And then other people kind of veer off and kind of try to find their own faith, right? So it sounds like you were kind of just like going with it, but it wasn't a
It was
huge
it felt
impact.
like an obligation, not that it was forced, like just to be clear, but it was just one of those where I did it because my parents were like, "Hey, we're gonna try this out." So,
Mhm.
you know.
Totally makes sense. And then you said you started skateboarding. Was that in your teen years or was that later on or?
No, it was around the same exact time as my near-death experience. So I don't know if it was technically before or after, but I believe I was about 8 years old when I started skateboarding as well. So
Oh,
right
okay.
around that time.
Okay. And so, all right, perfect. Well, so yeah, I mean, let's get some information on what happened. So you start skateboarding, you're 8 years old. What what led up to the near-death experience?
Yeah, so my near-death experience was I was 8 years old. I was sleeping over a family member's house. Let me get cozy here. Hold on. So so yeah, I was sleeping over a family member's house, and long story short, they had a cat, like a long-haired gray cat. I had absolutely no idea that I was allergic, and neither did anyone else. And apparently, what it does is it goes for my asthma. So I've always had asthma. I've had a few asthma attacks in the past. So it gets late, everyone goes to sleep. I'm watching cartoons and I'm hanging out with this cat. And I'm literally using this cat as a pillow, which is crazy because cats are usually they're gonna swipe your eyeballs out or something, you know? And so and yeah, I'm cuddling with this cat. I start using my inhaler. I have no idea that the cat is what's actually causing the damage.
Mm.
So long story short, over the course of a handful of hours, I drained all the medicine in my inhaler, finally said that I have to wake up my aunt. And the reason it got into a dire circumstance was because I waited so long to wake up my aunt. And quite honestly, the only reason I did at that point was because I ran out of medicine. Like I had no other choice. And I just felt bad. Like I knew it's the middle of the night, they're sleeping. I didn't want to wake them up. And even when I decide to wake them up, I'm like tiptoeing into their room, all like stealthy, you know. And yeah, told her what was going on. She had a plan to go to my grandparents' house. And my grandfather lived at the time like 5 minutes up the road. So the plan was to go to his house and use his inhaler. And that's what we did. So we hop in the car. When I was in the car, when I was in the car was probably the worst part of my entire life. Not to sound drastic. This was a very long time ago. I've obviously moved on. But you know, it just wasn't a great feeling, like suffocating. It was very scary. Very kind of helpless feeling. You know, there was really nothing you could do. However, we get to my grandparents' house. I don't remember getting there. My consciousness basically ends in the car, but apparently 2 minutes later, we do actually get there. And what they say is that I tried to use his inhaler on the front lawn. That's when I kind of fell on my back and went unconscious. But my memory stops in the car.
Wow.
So from the car, all I remember is being in kind of like a black, kind of like a black space. It literally felt like space, like upon reflection, that's what it seemed like, as if I was floating through space, but there was no stars or anything, and there was this one light way off in the distance. Like kind of if you look out the window and you see a star, the size of it seems to be so small from where we are. And it just kept getting bigger and bigger, and next thing you know, it's like almost all I could see. So at the time, I thought it was coming towards me, but I was probably going towards it. I have no idea, but we were kind of being pulled to each other. And yeah, so once I get that close to the light, I start to hear this like kind of music sound. It was like these two notes, and everyone asked me what the notes are. I don't know. I can't explain it. I'm not a musician, but I think they call it a chord.
Yeah.
People in the comment section taught me it's called a chord, maybe. I don't know. But
Yeah,
yeah, it was
when you put two notes together, two, three notes, however many notes becomes a chord. It can, yeah, that's one way to look at it for sure.
Yeah, it sounded like if you have like 50 voices, 50 different voices trying to sing the same tune. Um, and yeah, it was beautiful sounding music and it was very quick, very brief. And then I just like woke up in the hospital and at that point was obviously confused. So apparently what happened was they actually so my heart was shut down for a really long time. My brain was shutting down. I think my brain was shut down, but um, they told my mother that they were going to call time of death in 30 seconds. And I know people, listen, I've talked to enough people. I know people like to exaggerate, but this is exactly what they told her. Um, so as far as how did I wake up within that window, I have absolutely no idea. Um, but that's what they told her, and then I miraculously woke up. I don't know what they did to save me, but the defibrillator thing, is that what they call it?
Yeah.
That wasn't working, nothing was working. So I don't know what actually made me wake up, but the best part of the story is that at some point afterwards, they're trying to test my cognitive state because my brain had been, shut down for a while. So they're asking me, who's the president? Where are you? This type of stuff. What's your name? And they asked me, how did you get to the hospital? And I told him that my mother carried me in her arms and walked me all the way to the hospital, which obviously didn't happen. And so
Right.
so I always thought that was kind of a funny part of the story, you
Yeah.
know. But
Yeah.
yeah, so it's a brief experience. I mean, it certainly in the moment it felt like forever, just as far as leading up to it, the suffocation, was horrible. But so basically that's kind of the foundation for what I do today, So when I came back from this experience, first thought was, okay, I'm really glad I survived. Second thought was kind of the realization like, whoa, man, like what would it be like right now if I had actually died? Like, this is so like 8 years old, this is now on the forefront of my mind. And the next thought after that was like, holy shit, dude, I'm definitely gonna die one day. And it's just ever since then, 8 years old, it's like, okay, um, I don't know what reality is, what existence is. It's a profound mystery. And luckily I do have fun kind of searching for the answers, but it's bizarre, man. It's so weird, but whatever this life is, it's beautiful, it's chaotic, and I love it. So
Wow. I want thank you so much. I haven't that's the first time I've heard your story. I know that you do your podcasts and things like that, but I haven't dug in too much to hear about your story. And it's funny, when you started before we got talking too, you said, like it's pretty brief. It's not you kind of explained that before we got talking because some people have really, as you know, some of the people have really extravagant experiences and um,
yeah.
others are
Yeah, I'm a little
shorter.
jealous. I'm a little jealous. I feel like if I had maybe gone into the light, perhaps that's where all that stuff happens, but I just
Right,
got
right.
just a peek.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's funny though because you think about the fact that you were 8 years old when this happened and how profound that would be in the effect of who you became or have become in comparison to your peers, right? Like if you think about like, your buddies and stuff who, you know, there's so many people in this world who don't experience any of this at all until that day when they're 85 years old and it's time to go or whatever age. And so
Yeah.
it I've always been curious about that. Why do some of us get that little hint? Why do some of us get that little moment like you got it? Not that all of us want it. Like I've said myself, I didn't have an NDE. I've said this many times on episodes, but there was a profound desire to understand the unknown. And that alone took me through thousands of, you know, readings and things like that of research on this subject. So it gave
Well,
me the
it's
insight.
yeah, I mean, it's scary to be fair. And I've seen videos of yours where you've kind of explained kind of the background of, why it is that you got into this. And look, I kind of agree. It's like what is scarier than actually dying? Like the idea that you're literally gonna cease to exist entirely. Like this is a big deal to me. I don't find it like unreasonable to say, okay, like that's pretty important. But and to be honest, one of the main things that gives me comfort in that is it's going to sound crazy, but I think it's just the fact that 100% of organisms die. So like forget about 8 billion people. There's 2.16 million different species on this planet. That's just planet Earth. So like if 100% of people are dying, I'm sure I'll be fine. But it's interesting. It's scary to think about, that's where the question goes from like what am I to what is I? Like literally where was I before I was born and where the hell am I going? Like this is what I think about all the time outside of skateboarding and yeah,
What
luckily like I said, huh?
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say, but what? Because you've said a few things there a little bit. You said that, like the fear of the fact that yeah, you'd cease to exist, right? But you have to realize that you were existing, right? Because the you that you're attributing this to is the you, right? You're thinking of this as your you. And that's
Yeah.
not what your you is. Your you is something different because, like you said, they were about to give time of death, which means you probably time of death had probably already happened. You were on the brink, you were on that doorstep that we talked to so many people about, and yet you still were aware. You said there was a light that you were going towards, you could see it, You heard music. There was no music being played in those chord sequences in the hospital or on the front, wherever you were when you were going through this. My point is there was some type of existence that your awareness was you were aware of, which means you don't cease to exist. And that's so I just wanted to bring that up because I think you're referring to you as Dave. You know,
Absolutely, yeah.
this entity, this avatar that you have on this earth at this time. Yes, that will be gone. Just like I will be gone, just like everybody will be gone. But at 8 years old, you were given the gift of knowing that something existed beyond Dave. And that in itself it's pretty powerful.
So I really like what you bring up. I will say to kind of clarify, I wouldn't say it's a knowing though. I would say it was a peak. It was enough to leave me hopeful that something happens after this life. But if I'm 100% honest, like I don't know that for a fact. Like if I knew that for a fact, I probably wouldn't care enough to talk to all these near-death experiencers
Mm,
myself. Like there's the part of me where it's like, look, I don't want to get lost in a belief system that I just say, okay, well, I know for a fact what happened. You know how many people I talk to that not all of them, but some of them will sit there and tell you how they know exactly how consciousness works. They know exactly how the fifth dimension works.
yeah.
I don't want to be that guy. That's just me personally.
Right,
So
right.
so I would say that yes, I'm hopeful because I experienced something, but you're also talking like 23 years ago, the memory's hazy. Like it's not something that I know for a fact. To be fair, I just wanted to kind of
No,
clarify.
absolutely. And I would also state that, that your experience, again, like I said, you were on more of a doorstep, right? You know, just like some of the people we've talked to who are gone, like they were gone, flatlined,
Yeah.
um, and not to take away what you experienced, but your experience, it is a near-death experience, but it's more of like a close near-death experience. It was like you were right there and then you came back. And I know all about asthma. I grew up with asthma too, and allergies to cats and dogs. Now all of a sudden my cat allergy's gone. No idea how that happened.
Really?
Yeah, it's gone. Uh,
Huh.
but I too had a puffer. I had the blue thing, and I'd be like eating that like candy. When I was a kid, everybody was smoking in the house around me. So my cup was already filled. So you bring in an animal or something that I'm allergic to, I was I was in big trouble. So I know
Yeah.
exactly what that feels like. It's scary. There were times I remember, and this is why sometimes I question where did all these um where did the desire in me happen to try to figure out what's going on? Because there were moments in my own, you speak about your aunt. It's funny. It's really, here's our, here's where there's connection here. Okay. You're going to be like, wow. Um, I can recall a few times I was over at my aunt's house. She had big animals, big dogs, and sleeping. And waking in my sleep to catch my breath. So sleeping and going, okay, I'm good. Okay. Now, I was probably around the same age, 8, 9, 10 years old, and I didn't recall having anything like you had. I didn't have a severe allergic situation,
Yeah, but
but
you understand what it feels like the not being able to breathe.
I
I
understand what it
understand what you're
feels
saying.
like not being able to breathe, and I also don't know if something ever happened for me to recall. I mean, when you stop breathing, was I having dreams or was something else happening and I'd come back? What my point is until you brought it up, I thought, yeah, I had those moments, but I never act and that suffocation feeling, it's not a good feeling. I can understand exactly when you said how scary that was in the car. I totally understand that feeling. It's not a nice feeling at all.
Yeah,
But
I mean
yeah.
it's one of those where, like I said, I've had and it's interesting that I didn't know you had asthma as well when you were younger. Yeah, it's one of those where I've had a few asthma attacks, but this one, I'm gonna be honest, man, I spent a lot of time after this experience just hoping to God that I go out. Like I'd rather get hit by a. Can I swear on your show?
You can. I edit it out. You can say what you want, but it's edited usually. Yeah.
Listen, I would rather like anything else happen. I mean, I try not to I try to pick my words carefully because I don't want to come off in the wrong way, but like this was the absolute worst thing that ever happened to me. Like it literally felt like I was trapped in my own body. Like I mean it is what it is, man. You know, so
Yeah.
it was far beyond like any other asthma attack I've ever had. I genuinely wouldn't wish it upon my worst enemy. And yeah, I spent a lot of years afterwards just, a little bit nervous that, okay, like it's not even I don't want to go out in that same way. And like, it's pretty likely that it will happen that way. So I spent a lot of time like pretty concerned about that, where I'm like, dude, I'd rather get hit by a fucking bus. Like, you know what I mean? Like, give
Yeah.
me anything else. But anyway, pardon my language. I'll go back to being a professional.
No, it's okay. I totally get it though, because you're saying like that'd be a quick transition if you got hit by a bus or something, right? I get that. The only thing
Yeah,
I
I'm
was gonna say,
halfway joking. Yeah.
yeah, I look at having that kind of attack and asthma again, being around asthma, I could attribute it probably the same sense of individuals I talked to or interviewed who've had drowning experiences because your lungs aren't able to do what their functioning is meant to do, which is to breathe in air. So if you can't breathe in air, you're not breathing. And so whether you're having an asthma attack or drowning, those types of things. But I will say this, right? And this is different from your experience, but there's plenty of people I've talked to who've had drowning experiences where they go from panic and fear and the worst fear you could imagine to complete relaxation to acceptance and then into the light and then into whatever experience they have. And I've always been fascinated about why there's a transition of severe fear and this, to, oh, I'm okay. I'm going to give into it. Like what triggers that? And there's some of them sense like either a voice, some of them sense an inner feeling of I'll be okay. And so you didn't really have that. You were in panic mode, what I would consider more of like an immediate, quick, close to death feeling, and then come
Yeah.
back. Yours is a
I
different
think
experience.
Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly not. My goal is not to compare my experience to anyone else's, but I will say you bring up an interesting point. I think potentially that panic mode switching into like relaxation, acceptance. I mean, um, I'm not going to speak for anyone else, but potentially that's, a point where, your consciousness is starting to dim out or something like this. I have no idea. I've never drowned before. But I do think it's like okay. Oh man, sorry. So I think like for example, when I go from being in the car in a panic to being in that black space, seeing the light and everything's kind of relaxed, I think potentially that's the part where you're not actively able to feel yourself suffocating anymore. Like
Mhm.
potentially that has to do with why the relaxation and everything. But I don't know. Again, I'm not here to speak about like other people's experiences.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm just obviously when I hear an experience and I've spoke with so many, I can hear similarities and then the differences, right? And what I'm hearing in
Yeah.
the difference is yours is there wasn't that shift over. And you mentioned like when the consciousness dims, but I would almost see it like um almost the consciousness comes more we're more aware of our consciousness at that moment because no longer are we being controlled by our brain like all our if our functions are stopping in our body and the human functions are shutting down and if there is another part of us which I'm highly convinced there is based on conversations then I would think that would become more aware much like someone who's blind can sometimes have a heightened sense of hearing. It doesn't mean their hearing is better, but it's heightened sense because that's what they're using. So I sometimes wonder if once our bodily functions are discontinuing or not functioning correctly, that other part of us starts to become more aware. And you hadn't got to that point. That's the I'm not um bringing down your experience at all. What I'm
I
saying is
know.
you didn't actually get to that stage where things got a little bit woo woo, as they say. It didn't go into like the crazy town. It was like you
Yeah.
were back and you're still struggling and they're trying to get you back, and so that's all I was kind of
Yeah, so and I think it's a
interested in.
fascinating concept. So I love pondering, what is consciousness? How is this working? And you bring up a great point again. I think that one of my ideas, and I just want to make it clear, it's just an idea. I'm not locked into it, but it is one that I lean towards at this time. It seems as though a lot of it is built upon limitation. I use the example of the number of cones and rods in our eyes often just because it's a perfect example. Some near-death experiencers talk about they can visually see colors that we don't have here on Earth. But we literally see less than 1% of the light spectrum. I have a pet bird that sees more colors than I ever have in my life because she has four cones and rods in her eyes. So it like to me, I connect that and say, okay, well, what if the colors are always here, but we literally just can't see them right now because we're in this body? Think about other species. There are some species that literally don't have eyesight. They don't have eyeballs. Maybe they have sonar. Like we have different senses. So perhaps when you die, perhaps that kind of filter of limitation is lifted potentially. It's not a guarantee, but people worry about like, what if there's nothing after death? Like, what if everything is after death? Just a thought.
Yeah. No,
Uh,
absolutely. Absolutely. I just had someone I just interviewed on Monday who was born in their right eye like their whole life. Or sorry, did I say born? Blind in their right eye since birth. And when they died, when they had a full out experience, they could see everything in 360, including obviously from their right side peripheral, also realizing they didn't have a body but could see. And when he came back, one of the first things that came back was like that, oh wow, yeah, I'm blind. Like it was like, oh, I went from this to this back to this. And so, you know, I really struggle with the idea that that's some kind of hallucination because, like, how did the expansion happen? I would see it more as a
yeah.
limitation if you're going offline. If your body is shutting down, I would see more of a limited experience. Yes, maybe there's the what do we call it? The not THC, that's something totally different. CBD or no,
The DMT.
DMT. There's too many three-letter abbreviations here. But yeah, that over stimulus moment of okay, that could be doing something, but it's beyond that. It goes into this whole other realm. So I just struggle with, and I'm a skeptic too. Like I try to see both sides. It's just if something seems like my logic comes on and says, how does something expand when it's dying? And the only thing that can come to me is that we're more than this. That's my
Well,
easiest way to kind of see it.
and it would make sense too, because think about it. Like, what is the probability that billions or trillions of years have gone by, and then you show up as a human being of all species on planet Earth of all planets at this time for 70 years? Like, there's species on this planet that live for like 3 hours. Like, it just seems a little bit unlikely that it would be a virtually unlimited amount of species that live for a few hours or a few years and then that's it. Like it seems like something else is
Right.
going on. Like we
Right.
might have been somewhere before. It's so interesting, man.
Yeah, and then it gets into this whole crazy part of when we talk about simulation theory or the idea that we're all a video game, and that something people think that's such a crazy concept and like throw that out. But and I don't want to lose anyone with this idea. It doesn't mean there isn't something godly out there or spiritual about who we are. Because when you think of a video game, we put it into this limited context of what a video game is to us humans, okay, which is like an Xbox or like it's like some video game or whatever. But the point is that in a video game, you would have different characters you would make, and some of those characters would have different attributes, and some of those, if you start really thinking about it like that, it's kind of what's going on, and we don't really know who we are now and who we are in 10,000 years, and it starts getting really crazy to go down that road. And I think a lot of people fear thinking too hard into these things, but I just try to say to people, keep an open mind to everything, because what's the point of closing your mind into just one idea. Like it's better to open your mind to everything and
Yeah.
then judge how you feel based on those open-minded conversations. And if you still go in that direction, awesome. Like if you're still like, nah, we're just here for a brief moment and that's it, cool. But keep your mind open and think of all the different things that we could be.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I wonder sometimes, like, what if, like, it seems like an enormous chemistry project, but I feel like when I say that, maybe people think it's like, oh, like an alien has us on its desk. Like, I'm not talking about that. The aliens would be part of that project, right?
Right.
So not literally a project, but like it just seems like there's a part of it where there's chemistry. Like some people attract, some people repel. You understand, and then it's what if it's like the same consciousness that inhabits all of these bodies, and the difference is literally the neural networks, the physical body, the environment, the experiences. Like, what if that's literally the only difference between us? Like, I don't know, it's just
Mm.
another idea. I think about this a lot, man. It's so weird. But then there's so many ways that it could work that it gets a little bit overwhelming, but I love it, man. It's fascinating.
Absolutely. And then I would bring it down to like the beautiful thing about all of this comes down to evolution of who we are. And at one point, we thought the world was flat. There's still some people that believe that. My point is, there was a point where we thought, if we went into a body of water and went across the ocean, it would just fall. We'd fall off. And that didn't happen. My point is, our concept of our reality shifts and changes as we evolve. And for anyone to be in this current reality in 2024, almost 2025, to think that we've got it all figured out, we are so far from wrong. Like it is,
Oh
we are
yeah.
so wrong, I should say, so far from right. We are so wrong because it's just going to keep evolving and we're going to keep understanding more. And life is amazing as life is, as beautiful as life is. Why not look at the possibilities of what it can be and what we actually are? Like I just don't think there's anything wrong with that. Um, but I think probably what happens is some people, when they go down these rabbit holes, it's so hard for our minds to conceptualize ideas that are beyond what we already know. Right. And a lot of, this because you've interviewed NDEers, a lot of them come back and they were told everything. They were told they know everything. And you go, okay, well, what is it? And they're like, I can't explain it. Or I can't remember, or I can't recall, or I wasn't able to retain some of that. Or, well, yeah, because we're limited in what we can understand here. Just the idea that other people have this, like they go into the afterlife, they have these NDEs, and they get the answers to all their questions they want. They understand the purpose of why we're here, all these things. But then you notice they come back and they can't tell you all that. They can give you a little bit, but they can't remember it all. I'm just curious if you have any ideas of why that
Yeah,
would be.
and that's interesting because I think we take a language for granted, so it is kind of interesting. We're the only species on the planet that talks, which is, well, no, I guess we've taught birds and stuff how to talk, right? But yeah, so I guess it's like how would you relay that information? Plus it's like, yeah, what if okay, if anything happens, this is what's crazy for me, right? If anything happens after we die, if there is literally any part of us that will remain consciously aware after we die, like I don't know if people understand how like large of a deal that is. That means that literally we're not even human beings fundamentally. Now, of course, we're human beings right now. I'm just saying if life goes on, that means like we're not humans, we're something else. Maybe it's an orb of consciousness. Maybe we've chosen to come down here. Like imagine a conversation in the afterlife. Imagine let's say there's a people talk about spirit guides, soul families, all this stuff. Like imagine having a conversation like, "Oh, you just got back from Earth, like that place looks crazy. How was it down there? You had a vessel, you were able to do things like physically, like physical life is our neutral, like that's what's the word I'm looking for? It's our there's a word I'm looking for, it's eluding me. But yeah, like physical life is what we're accustomed to. But like what if it's some sort of gift where we've been given this land to like try to in these vessels that we live in, and we have the ability to create our own heaven or our own hell, or
Hmm.
you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's just really interesting, man. I don't know. There's a part of it where if we knew for a fact that consciousness moved on after we die, like what would this world even really look like? Like, have you ever imagined, like we're sitting here talking right now, like imagine you knew for a fact exactly where you're going to go when you die.
Hmm.
Like, how differently would you live your life?
Oh,
And
100%.
like,
Yeah. Yeah. And I
it's
think that's
crazy.
going to happen. I think I think that at some point that will happen. And I think it's going to happen sooner than we actually believe. And that's just my gut feeling. And I don't know why I feel that, but I feel like we're going to know. And it will change the consciousness of who we are because it changes how we do things and react to things. But and some of those things aren't going to be good either, because some people don't take life serious enough as it is. So imagine those people. So, I could see a lot happening once that comes, but maybe we have to be mature enough as a species to be able to comprehend that concept. And I was going to say, you know, you talked about, imagine this, imagine this, imagine this. And, you know, I had somebody on not long ago who said, like, your coffee cup, right? This was just imagined at one point. We should create
Yeah.
this thing, this cylinder that I could with a bottom piece that I could drink my water out of, or this chair I can sit on. It was imagined. It never existed until we imagined it. And the fact that you just said, can you imagine if we're at some point up and we're talking about being, well, you just thought it, which likely means that is real. So, and I know that sounds crazy because someone's like, "Oh, are you saying elephants can fly then? There's flying elephants?" I don't know. I really don't. I can't say
There could be
yes
a
or
planet
no. I can't.
There could be a planet with animals that look like elephants where they're like hollow and they're
Yeah,
full of.
I don't know. Like, and the people are like, "Oh my gosh, I'm turning off this episode at this point." That's fine, but the
Well, think
idea is,
about it.
yeah,
Think about like what kind of life. You ever see those like enormous suns? Like the size of our star versus the size of many others. We've all seen the size comparisons. Like, what type of life emerges in a solar system around one of those like large stars? You know what I mean? Or just like, have you ever really thought like, okay, we're used to being taller than all the other animals on the planet because the animals that are larger, we've taken over all of their lands. Like we only see these animals at the zoo, which is really weird. And then so have you ever thought like, man, what's it like on other planets? Are there spiders that are like 400 feet tall or like something like this?
right,
Because
right,
it's all reference point. Like if you're 600 feet tall and your ceiling is 1,000 feet tall, it's going to feel exactly the same. You
right.
know what I mean?
Absolutely. I was just saying that the other day that it's hard to believe sometimes that dinosaurs roamed this earth. These massive, massive, uh, like dinosaurs and what are they? Triceratops, the flying ones, or no, pterodactyls.
Pterodactyls.
I mean, these things were like gigantic. They were like airplanes flying through the sky, and they were animals. So it's like, that concept to even think about right now seems almost absurd because we don't have that right now. But it was at one point, like we've seen the bones, like that. That's actually something we can still see, even though there's only so much we can see, right? Because eventually things do probably disintegrate and whatever happens over the however old the Earth is and all this stuff. And we're one planet in one universe of billions, or is it billions of universes? I don't even know. I shouldn't say because I'd have to fact check it, but I'm pretty sure
Hey, there could be.
there's a lot going on. So it's like I guess my biggest thing is I try to keep an open mind. That's who I've always been my whole life. And so when I was a teenager and I started getting the fear of death, um, the first thing I thought was, okay, if you break your ankle, you go to a doctor to fix your ankle, right? Okay, who's gonna know best about death? Some would refer to church or a high priestess or, someone who's been in religion or something. I went directly to the source of, okay, have people died? Like, have they come back from that? Because what happened? That was my whole like mindset. So, you had that at 8 years old and it was just a brief little moment. But And I don't know if you see it. That was one of the questions I did want to ask you is if even though it was brief, there was some type of existence that was still happening in this dark place with the music and the sound. When you came back with it, um, did it bother you for a while, or did it take a while to actually contemplate what had happened?
Absolutely. Yeah, it bothered the hell out of me. Uh, I don't know what else to say but that. I suppose the answer is yes. Like it was very disturbing, man. Like, that experience. It didn't feel great. I was happy I survived, but yeah, that was, like I said, it was followed by the immediate thought of like, okay, like, well, I'm glad I survived. I'm definitely gonna die. We're all gonna die. And then so it's, just from a young age pondering your own mortality. And it's something I've adapted to. It's no big deal. But at the time it was very distressing, yeah.
Yeah. The interesting thing is, let me ask you this question. What would have been better for you? The fact that you had that brief experience seeing the darkness and actually knowing existence was there while you were likely dead, or you're in the car, the next thing you know, you wake up in a hospital, let's say, and they say, "We got you back. You died." And there's no recall of anything at all, not 1 second. Out of those two
Hmm.
scenarios, what
It's a
is
good
more,
question.
yeah, like what gives you more relief?
Um, that's honestly a really good question. I suppose maybe I would have been less confused and more kind of I suppose if nothing had happened at all, that I would maybe more passively be like, oh, okay, well, I didn't notice anything, so whatever, and I would have went back to my own belief system or whatever. Yeah, I think the tricky part about having some sort of awareness in between is because there's so many variables of, was this, when did this actually happen? Like, was this because I didn't flatline? I didn't flatline until after I got out of that car. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like when did that really happen in the time frame? Like you're talking a decent amount of time for me to experience like 5 seconds of the other side. I don't know if that
Right.
happened in the car. Like I really don't know at what point that happened. So you could
Mm.
technically say like I don't know if I experienced that after the flatline or beforehand in reality. So this is what I'm saying. Like my brain, like I'm aware that like I don't want to be self-deceived. And that's why I say I don't know for sure. Like and it's just um it it's crazy, man. Life is crazy and it's scary, but it's whatever, man. All the more reason to just do what you love every day and never take it for granted. I will say I think I'm a little bit of like a hypochondriac ever since then. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, you ever get like, like a random sharp pain in your head or something like that? Like every time that happens, I'll be like, all right, well, I might die. We're gonna see what
Yeah.
happens.
Which is really interesting because I would have thought that because I look at that scenario that I just mentioned to you, and I would have more comfort in the fact that something happened during that flatlining or during that moment, or that I realize that I'm more conscious than I'm aware of. Like I would find more comfort in that than a blanket splat just gone back. Now, if that would have happened, maybe yeah, maybe you wouldn't have suffered through all the different things that you were going through, and that may have brought you to the point of okay, I can still just be my little 8-year-old self and just continue on. What was that, right? But what it did is I think it actually brought on like a mass amount of spiritual maturity on you at such a young age. And when that happens, it made you question things that most kids walking around 8 years old aren't doing. They're just picking their nose, walking around. Like they're not like thinking like what's going to happen when I die. Like that,
Oh
and I was
yeah.
doing that at 10, 11, 12 because I'd seen a movie and realized out of nowhere, oh, they die and then that's it. And that the I think what brought the fear on me was the idea of that's it. So I needed to prove to myself the best way possible that it doesn't happen like that. Have I proven that life exists beyond death? I haven't. I've talked to thousands of people or hundreds of people and read thousands of accounts of people who would say to me they feel proof has happened to them because they've experienced it. As I've said before in many of my episodes, I have experienced things beyond this reality. So if things beyond this reality can be experienced, then to me, it's all on the table because I am part of this reality. And if I see something or experience something that isn't part of this, then this is just temporary. And there's something more going on because my awareness is of that. And that's how I see it. So I think that brought down, because I too, like you, had severe hypochondriosis of dying. That's why I had to get to the bottom of it in my early 20s because I'm like, I can't walk around fearing everything that's going to happen. Like it's going to happen to all of us. We're all in line, like I've said, and we're all in line and we're just waiting for the day. And it's morbid, but it's the truth. And the sooner we can become,
Yeah,
because
and
you
I mean,
appreciate life more then.
yeah, and to be fair, like we have it pretty good. I think that human beings, and I'll try not to go too off topic here, but like human beings, we live significantly different than every other species on the planet. I'm not saying if it's good or bad, there's obviously pros and cons to it, but if you really take a look at the way that nature operates, like, we're not sleeping outside in a thunderstorm or in the snow. We're not sleeping with one eye open, watching our, children get eaten alive by predators and shit.
Right.
Like, you understand, like, this is, that's the trade-off where there's pros and cons to it. So it's like, yeah, man, like, it's gonna happen to all of us. Like, we technically have it pretty well. Like, think about, especially with all these advancements, like, don't get me wrong, it's the New World Order, and they're gonna you understand. It's like mass surveillance, New World Order. But like the interesting part is, okay, people could live longer. And, let's say, for example, your teeth get messed up. Like you could at least attempt to use this thing called money to have some dude put like new teeth in your head. Like you understand, like we're also very fortunate. What would have happened if you lost your teeth like 400 years ago? You would just die because you can't eat food. How are you going to hunt an animal down and you can't even eat it?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm a little bit on a tangent right now, but yeah.
No, no, I totally understand what you're saying, but I would attribute that to our obsession with existence and staying grounded in who we are as a human being and wanting to stay Joe forever and wanting to live forever. I want to live 500 years. And you know what I think that's because of? Because I believe that we don't understand who we really are. And it goes back to what we initially started talking about in the beginning of this conversation that what would life be like if you knew 100% without any doubt that a part of who you are, part of your piece of who you are, is more than just this bodysuit that you've jumped into. If we knew that for a fact, we wouldn't be so obsessed with sticking around and getting new teeth. We'd be like, these teeth are done and I'm done and I'll see you on the next trip or I'll see you on the other side. And it wouldn't be like everyone just lining up to take themselves out. That's not what I mean. And I just mean it
Yeah,
because I
it,
think half of the obsession is because of our unknowingness of what we are.
exactly. Well, and even potentially fear of death. Like, why else would you want to stay alive forever as a human being? Okay, we have very able bodies, sure. But like if you're talking a long enough time scale, logistically it doesn't make sense. Like the Earth is going to go into the sun. Perhaps we can make it to other planets. But if you're talking realistically, if you're talking like all the way to another, like into the Andromeda galaxy, like human beings are not going to survive that trip. Like it makes me think like, what if incarnating into lifetimes is literally how we travel the universe? Like, what if it's almost like in the moment you think you want to live forever, but really it would get to a point where you acknowledge like actually it's bad to be stuck in one form forever. It's like
Mm,
you take a water molecule and you freeze it into, an ice sculpture. It's like, well, at what point does it melt back down? You could form it into something else. Like you don't want to be
yes.
frozen in the same state forever.
Absolutely. It's like going into I just pictured like an orb going into a cylinder, and this is where you are. And once that's done, you can come back out and you can go elsewhere. And I think you're right. Do I believe, though, that over time, this gets right down the crazy train, but I do believe over time, as we evolve as human beings, we're going to understand quantum physics a lot better than we even understand now. We're going to understand how to bend reality and how to change things and probably be able to put things around us that keep us alive. Like you talk about, you know, there's only so much force a human can stand from speed in an aircraft, for instance. So there's only so fast you can go to get somewhere. So unless you have something around it that's stopping that from happening, uh,
Yeah.
we can't do it. Now I'm getting really crazy here with this stuff, but the,
No,
the
I'm following.
you know what I mean? So like the idea is we are here in this reality with gravity as human beings, and we're limited. There's limitations. So I totally am on the same wavelength of what you're saying there. And maybe that is the way that it's probably the easiest way to travel for sure. But let's stick around as long as we can. Uh,
Oh yeah.
and at the same sense, it's just I like this conversation because you're one of my first NDEers where I actually think you're the first one on the Soul Inspired where you didn't get quite far enough to completely shatter your reality. It gave you a small little taste of something that didn't make much sense to you at the time. And I think that if you were to look at your life's purpose and the plan you're doing, look at what you're doing, right? You're running this podcast. I think you said it's called a Sliver of Time, our Sliver of Time. You're doing
Yeah.
these things, you're talking to people. Had you known, you may have not taken that step because you're also someone who told me I'm a truth seeker. I think that about you as well. I think you're a truth seeker. You're actually closer to me in the sense that you didn't really have a crazy experience enough to just completely shift your reality and be like, hey, I'm gonna go sit on a hill and meditate for my whole
Yeah,
life.
and and
Like,
it and it and if I could add to that, and I do think we're similar in a way, which is why I was so excited to speak with you today. I would say though, I would say that it definitely did shatter my reality, not in a bad way, but like it completely changed my life. But with that being said, it's not like it was 140 days traveling through the universe experience.
right.
But whatever it was definitely played like a major impact, like completely changed my life, you know?
Yeah, I think it gave you a huge impact, but I guess what I was trying to say too was I don't think it convinced you 100% that you are much more than what you are. It
Yeah.
gave you almost like a starting point to discover and said, okay, go off and discover now. Here's a little taste. And that's what at least what I'm interpreting from it. So I
No,
to
that's on point. That's very accurate. Yeah.
yeah. Whereas like I said earlier, some kids they don't have that. They're just worried about if they're gonna get their PlayStation for Christmas and like that's all they care about. Like it's like and then I mean we still do that too, but my point is there's no other like worrisome thoughts of, you know, what's gonna happen to you. I think of people I've met over the years who were known as kind of like the class clowns or the crazy partiers of our groups, and they're the ones that sometimes end up leaving the earth quicker because they do some crazy stuff, right? They jump off that, I don't know, they do things that are more riskier, and then something happens because they've never really contemplated these ideas of non-existence. Next thing you know, you're like, oh, did you hear this, who passed away, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, yeah, he was wild, and yeah. But that might have been their experience. They didn't want to know. They wanted to just live hard. So,
Yeah, and it's I don't know, that's interesting. I wonder how much that factors in like um having a brush with death versus not having a brush with death in terms of, risk taking and thrill
mhm.
seeking. I'm not sure. I've never thought about that. I'd have to look into it, see what the numbers are. But personally, I've always been kind of like an adrenaline junkie. Like, for me, it's usually through skateboarding, but
Right.
I don't know. That's just who I am. I don't know if that has anything to do with the experience, but maybe you could argue that, okay, well, I've come close enough to death, like, at least with skateboarding, you're saying, okay, if I if I mess around and die, at least there was a point to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like at
that's
least I
true.
was trying to land a trick, like,
Right.
you know.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah, that's interesting then, because yeah, I haven't really ever been a thrill seeker, but I've been more the type questioning life, right? So, but you've also had a brink of with death and you're a bit of a thrill seeker, so that's an interesting concept too. So, this has been amazing, man. One of the questions, this wouldn't be a soul inspired episode if I don't ask this. I always ask this at the end of the conversations, and it's just to ask if you were to pinpoint a direct reason as to, again, you don't know the direct answer to this, but what is your main feeling or what comes over you when I ask you why we come here, like our purpose of existence?
The question is, how do I feel about the question?
What do
What
you feel is our main purpose or our main reason to even exist as human beings on the earth?
Okay. Um, it might sound typical, and it's just a guess, one of many that I've pondered, but it would seem like maybe we just want to experience perhaps if you're on the other side and you're looking down at some planets and you're like, you know, you don't have the understanding because you don't have that reference point. So take something simple like laughing, for example. You might say, why the humans do this thing called laughing, where they're not talking, they're not communicating. It's a weird thing they do. Why do they do this? Like, what's so funny? You wouldn't even have the concept of humor. Like, you don't understand it. So perhaps you go in to say, let me figure out what that is. Why are people doing this? Or you could take, for example, skateboarding. Why are people doing it? It's clearly dangerous. Why would someone want to do this? Like it could just be genuine curiosity. Some people argue that, oh, if they signed up for like a life of drug addiction or something like this, to give a negative example, right? Like maybe they wanted to experience that. I think perhaps it's not that they wanted to be a drug addict. But perhaps from the outside looking in, they're saying, why would the humans continue to poison themselves? It's not making sense to me. I want to go down there and see what the hell's going on.
Mm.
Like, I think it could just be genuine curiosity, and you're like, hey, let's try this out.
Wow. I love that. And I've had some NDErs say that. It's just about literally the word they would use is experience. It's what is that about and how does that affect you as a human being? What is what is the consequences of those things? So people want to come down and experience that. And the funny part is sometimes these experiences people tell me is some people remember pre-birth, right? I'm sure you've talked to people who maybe had pre-birth experiences.
Yeah, those are
And
super
they're
intriguing. Yeah.
really interesting, right? Because they're looking at like, okay, let's go down and try to do this. And if we do that, and the funny part is a lot of them will say at the time, they didn't actually see it as like this negative thing. They're like, oh yeah, let's go and get, beat up by our parents and then at like, whatever it is. And these are when we're here, those are like excruciating, very sensitive like things to go through. But from
Yep.
what some of them have said is over there, it's like, oh yeah, no, I want to go experience that. And you're like, why would you want to do that? You know, but the lack of the emotion, lack of the attachment of who we are. See, we're so attached here. So
Yep.
it's just that idea of experience, like you said, to come down and have that experience. I think that's really an interesting way of looking at it.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point again. You've brought up a few good points today. That's awesome. But yeah, I think where like we come down here and you're like, this is way where I would never sign up for this and this type of stuff. But perhaps you honestly did. Like perhaps you've been sitting around for a few thousand years. You're like, you know what? Screw it. I'll go in. I'll go in and it'll be good in ways and bad in ways. And it is what it is, like
Yeah.
perhaps it gets to a point where you're like, let me try something new. What is it like to be a bird or something. Like we look out at the animals, all they're doing is fighting. Like
Yeah,
that is
that's true.
literally
Yeah.
that is literally wildlife. They're just fighting and eating each other. Like it's crazy, it's vicious, right? But
Right.
that's like the cycle of life, apparently.
Yeah. Wow. We could leave it at that. That's a nice takeaway for everybody, all the
Oh, of
wildlife. But
course.
it's true that a lot of them are doing that. Every once in a while, if you see them cuddling up to one another, it's usually because they're trying to be warm. And then they'll fight each other again later.
I'm
Uh,
sure I'm sure there's a little love in there too, of course, but
it,
you know.
exactly. Yeah, absolutely. This has been an amazing conversation. Thank you so much. Dave, for coming on and I know you're under the weather, so I appreciate you taking the time and at least getting through the conversation and telling us about your experience. And how can people get in contact with you, or where do they go to see any of the information that you're putting out there?
Yeah, so they can go to YouTube/r Sliver of Time. Whatever the handle, I think you have to put an at symbol on the handle, but yeah, it's called R Sliver of Time, OUR. And yeah, I interview near-death experiencers. We ponder the mysteries of existence and consciousness, and so, eventually we'll do some theories on consciousness as well. Um, and so that's mainly where they could find me on YouTube. And yeah, I appreciate you having me on, man. I actually had a blast. I know we started off rough. I was really not feeling that well, very under the weather, but I actually feel great now. I'm pretty energized after this conversation. So I appreciate it, man. Thank you.
That's awesome. And maybe that talks a lot about how our energy works, right? You never know. I always like to turn to the camera and say, please continue to like, share, and subscribe to the Soul Inspired. You guys are the reasons we do this, including Dave. I'm sure he'd probably attest to that as well. We need people to keep sharing these stories and helping out with the communities. So thank you so much. And until next time, we'll see you on the Soul Inspired.
So